Good morning from Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. Central Business live stream. Today we're going to talk about Meg's continued outreach and any refinements there. We're kind of waiting on a couple things, so we'll kind of probably tease more of what we'll have next week.
Yeah.
And we'll also talk about designing your work area for focus.
Haha, yes, that's a good thing. Okay, but before that, we've got our communication tip. And yesterday we were talking about kind of, what to do when someone's screaming at you. And kind of at the end, I brought up the point of if it's nothing that you did at all versus if it actually is your responsibility / your fault. And how to deal with that, because that can be really hard. I mean, it's hard enough, dealing with irate clients or coworkers when you did nothing wrong. But when you actually did do something wrong, I almost feel like it's in some ways harder, in other ways not, but I don't know. So what I wanted to kind of focus on is, okay, you did something wrong. There's a couple of ways to address it. One, which is the best way, be proactive and fess up. I.e., recognize that you've done something wrong, and rather than waiting for someone else to realize it, right, find the people who are affected and let them know, because, maybe it will be fine, but also maybe it will cause big problems that could have been avoided if you were upfront about things. And I know that's hard and scary, but it will end up being much more appreciated, even if, it might be not realized that it's appreciated. I'm using a lot of really weird passive voice, but so someone who you don't tell will be super angry if they realize something and it's a problem, right? And they might be annoyed if you tell them, and they won't know that they would have been really angry if you hadn't told them. That's the thing, so.
Yeah. Most of the time, they're not going to thank you for it, and you're not going to realize exactly how much worse it would have been if you just let them find out. Mm-hmm. Not only because it's less pleasant hearing or discovering something that's not working out on your own, especially knowing that someone hushed it up or didn't tell you and they could have, but then, what other consequences are going to happen as a result of something going wrong, etc. So you have those on top of the thing itself to deal with.
Exactly. You are good at summarizing my words in nice, concise sentences. Thank you. So that's always the best thing, be factual, right? Talk about what happened. You don't have to equivocate and give all of the reasons why, right? It's generally, again, concise is better in a lot of these situations. Mm-hmm. And giving lots of reasons will just make it sound like you're trying to make excuses.
Yeah.
And so, but also coming with a plan of how to fix it, right? Or some ideas of how to fix it, even if you don't know exactly what to do. That will always go a long way in helping, because, they'll see that you've actually thought about it and you're not just kind of being like, oops, I made a mistake here, fix it, fix it for me. There we go. So then the other situation is if you are not the one who realizes it, if someone else realizes it and, tells you about it, there's going to be that kind of gut reaction of like, oh crap, badness. And the discomfort of having someone else point out one of your faults or a mistake is something to be reckoned with. It is not pleasant. And it's a great opportunity for growth if you can catch yourself in that. Because if you, again, try to shy away from it and you're just like, oh gosh, just try to ignore it. Yes, you may be able to, fix things or whatever, but you'll miss out, I think, on the opportunity for that relationship to grow. And the reason I say that is because so many of the best relationships that I've had have been ones where I've made huge mess ups. And by working with the person, right, we actually ended up coming to a better solution or coming closer, or they felt more comfortable with me so that if they messed up in the future, right, we could be more open with each other. So that was always really nice. But also I have a tendency to be really good at lying to myself, or not necessarily lying to myself, but just kind of tricking myself, I guess, into contentment and that things are all good. And so I've learned to be grateful for those times when people point out when I've made a mistake. And especially when those people are extra nice and help me to fix it. And so by being gracious and not being defensive, not saying that like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. This is not necessarily about you, right? They're not trying to make you feel bad, hopefully. But there is a situation to deal with. And so kind of removing, as much of the emotion as you can while recognizing it's going to feel terrible, and that's okay. And then finding a way to move forward. A proper apology goes a long way, but as part of that apology, making up the difference for whatever happened, like trying to make it right. And I think that is one of the steps that a lot of us are kind of like, I don't know how to do that. That's hard. So I'm sorry. And then you just kind of go on your way, which is a Band-Aid, but it's not going to have the same effect of strengthening that relationship that actually making up for it would. So yes, you're going to mess up, and that's okay. Be honest, be open, accept it, and work with the person. And if they have that close relationship with you or want to have that close relationship with you, they will find a way as well to work with you in that.
And we've said this with a lot of other tips, but it's just as true here that like instead like after you've said I'm sorry and been open about like what it was, right? You don't want to paper over that. But after you've said that, rather than keep apologizing or giving lots of reasons,
yes,
thank them for their patience or something else. Give them an opportunity to step up and be in a positive role.
Yep.
And I think you mentioned that it's an opportunity to grow.
It is.
And kind of like we said with being sick and how that's an opportunity to show how good you can take care of yourself, how well you can take care of yourself, right? Or, when I was just sick and very depressed and I was like, all right, but this is an opportunity for me to show my perseverance and really work on my positive attitude, right? To practice that. When you really messed up and you have to apologize, it like a very positive spin to take on it is this is a chance where you really get to show your growth mindset, really work on that. And if you don't have it, that's the time to work on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it feels counterintuitive because it feels like admitting a fault, right? But you can't escape the faults. You can't escape the mistakes. They're going to happen. Everyone has them, right? And so, kind of like with the awkward conversations, if we just address it up front, right? Like, we're human. It's okay. And I think I say this as like a historically, ridiculously perfectionistic person who I could not admit to being wrong because that would mean I'm less than 100% perfect, and that's not okay. But I recognize that existing as a human was very difficult with that mindset. So figuring out a way to be okay with not being perfect.
Well, and the idea of like mistakes will happen. You'll probably get more mileage out of learning how to deal with them gracefully. Your own mindset, how you interact with other people, etc., how you recover from it. So that being able to move relatively smoothly through a mistake and course correct quickly is going to give you a lot more mileage as opposed to trying to be perfect, which is going to paralyze you because you'll be afraid to act at all for making mistakes. When you make a mistake, you'll get paralyzed or compound it. Yeah. You'll be slow to deal with it, etc. So
I think that right there is a big deal. I once, when I was working for the market research firm as an account manager, there was a project we were running, and I don't know exactly how the miscommunication happened, but there was a miscommunication about quotas that had to be met. And I know I was probably like 80% responsible for the miscommunication, something that I had misunderstood that had gotten changed on some back end or whatever. And then just I was the one who was supposed to convey that on, and I hadn't for whatever reason. And it ended up costing our client like $15,000, which to me, you know, I was like 21, 22. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much money. It's still a lot of money. But when I realized the mistake, I was horrified. I didn't know. I just thought, like, this is it. I'm going to get fired. Like, this is the end of it for me. I am a terrible person. And I spent longer than I would care to admit just kind of stewing in that before trying to actually figure out, okay, how can I make this right? And talk to my boss, and, you know, because I was really young, I had no idea what I was doing. And he was really great at helping me kind of work through that and say, like, yep, you messed up. So we're going to have a meeting, and it's going to be hard. And we're going to talk about ways that we can work through this. And we did. And I ended up retaining the client and ended up making them way more tens of thousands of, you know, dollars worth of value later. So it's one of those things that, like, it can be scary and it can have that potential to really trip you up. But that it doesn't have to if you're willing to do the hard stuff. And it was hard, and I got yelled at, and that was unpleasant, but yeah. I deserved it, so.
I got yelled at by the VP of LinkedIn once.
Ouch!
Well, not in person, I guess, via email. Chewed out via email.
Yeah.
It didn't matter as much because I knew
good.
I was on my way out.
Yes, yeah.
I was actually taking the heat from someone else.
Were you?
Well, so we were working on a prototype, and this other person was really hot, wanted everyone to see it, and was really hot to release it. And it is a feature that is now live at LinkedIn. It was the feature that matches someone with online courses based on their profile.
Oh, interesting.
So I did the front end of that internally, and then he released it to an all-employee list, and people loved it. And the VP is like, told us you can't release stuff on that list because then people will expect it, and we'll have to field all these questions about it. And so, like, basically, you're wasting my time.
How dare people have expectations?
Right? You know, like we didn't make any commitment to approve this, and you're making it seem like we did, and now people are going to ask me a bunch of questions, and it's going to waste my time. And I'm like, you're right. We totally released it without going through all the proper approvers and channels, and I'm sorry about that. And, you know, I said that I was on my way out. So it didn't matter to me, and I was just like, well, you know, maybe this other person will be able to do something with it. He left the company too. And so, like, again, like, there really was no catastrophic fallout, and, like, the real loss that I was getting chewed out for by the VP of LinkedIn was like, oh no, now he's gonna have to field extra questions in his email.
Yeah. And I think that too, getting the perspective of, like, okay, what are the actual ramifications of this? Because I definitely catastrophize, you know, mistakes that I make as having these, like, long-reaching consequences, mostly of, like, people hating me, but also of, like, being this huge burden on them when it's generally, you know, not great, but also not as bad as I make it out to be in my mind.
Well, and, you know, looking at that in retrospect, for me, it's a funny story. Like, there was literally zero impact because I was ready. I didn't lose sleep over that. For LinkedIn, actually every single one member had already left. There was like a team of 3 people piloting this thing. I left. The other person also left because he didn't deal gracefully with that mistake. And so whenever they did actually build out the final feature, they probably pretty much had to start from scratch because everyone from the original team had already left.
Interesting.
Because they didn't handle it gracefully. So, like, if you handle mistakes gracefully and just move on and take a big picture, chances are they really won't hold you back that much.
Yeah.
But if you make a big deal out of them, you're probably going to have much bigger consequences. I think that was a good example.
That's a great example, yeah.
You know, like, for me, I just moved on. I had plenty of great recommendations from the people who actually worked with me. It's not like anyone going to my resume was going to call the VP of LinkedIn to see if I did a good job.
Yeah, seriously.
I wasn't, like, working directly under him at all. That was earlier on in my career. So, yeah, mistakes happen, and it's not the end of the world. And especially if they're around deadlines too.
Right.
Like, deadlines are so much more fungible than, like, and very often arbitrary than, like, most people think.
I will say, especially in the United States. Now, this is not always the same in every country. If you miss a deadline in Japan, like, bad things. Yeah, you can like break trust in relationships by not following through. So in Japan, it's generally under promise, over deliver.
Yep.
Whereas in the United States, it's sometimes the opposite, which is okay though, because people kind of accept that as part of our way of functioning here in the U.S. So
yeah, I mean, people, I am a big fan of like MVP, under promise, over deliver, but like so very often big things happen. And I mean, a lot of times, so to push back on the deadline, like a lot of the reason deadlines shift is because someone changed what they wanted or didn't scope it out properly in the first place.
Yeah.
And so the idea that like, all right, if you're handling these things properly as they come up, right, saying like, hey, you also requested this feature. This doesn't fit in our timeline.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And ideally you're doing that before the deadline, but like then you'll realize like, oh, we need to readjust the deadline. That kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
And again, it's only if you don't deal with that, if you realize like, oh no, this is going to affect our deadline. I don't want to deal with it because I don't want to be blamed for pushing our deadline. And then you wait until the deadline's supposed to happen, and then people are surprised by the fact that it doesn't, right? That kind of thing is the example of dealing not gracefully with the mistakes.
Yeah.
But like for the most part, if you're actually on top of things, and sometimes you also just genuinely miss things, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes, you know, there's going to be an issue.
Yes.
But
I've dropped the ball, you know,
right?
before, and it happens.
But if you have a good process of communication along the way where, and you're paying attention to new requirements, I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
New requirements or changing requirements, a lot of people just let those slide, but if you're paying attention to them and flagging how they're going to impact the deadline, then usually you can avoid a lot of these mistakes.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
These are getting longer.
I know, right? Oh my goodness.
All right. I'll make sure my business tip is short.
Yes. Well, and I can give a short update as far as, you know, things that have been, because it's pretty similar to what's been going on all week, except that yesterday I did a thing where I focused less on one thing and more on a few different things, making sure that I had things time boxed, saying, okay, I'm going to spend a half hour on this thing and then an hour on that thing and then an hour on this thing and then taking little breaks in between. And that worked really well for me yesterday. I think because I'd spent the other days earlier really focusing in on one thing. And so just as far as like understanding my own process, there are times I need to spend 4 hours just like diving deeply into something. And there are other times when I can do more than one thing in a day. And so I think kind of seeing that is going to help me in my planning to say like, okay, this, you know, next day, what kind of day do I need to have work-wise in order to be most successful? So I think that's nice. And then the other thing is, you know, having now gotten kind of like my package list and all of that stuff sent to our marketing consultant, he's finishing up the, you know, kind of product research thing map for us that he is working on. And so hopefully have that, I'm thinking today-ish maybe. I need to check my messages. I saw he had sent us a couple this morning, but I hadn't gotten into them yet. So, but yeah, so that's going to be a part of today. I'm going to take a look at that depending on what I see, then kind of moving forward. But what he's doing is helping me to take these different packages that I have, find ways to have the lead magnets to each of them. What are the upsells? What are the downsells, right? What is that process and how can we run ads and things like that for maximum efficacy? So
he has a whole like market plan map thing that we will go into and be happy to share here. And maybe able to share clips from some of our conversations.
Yep.
So that'll come up. We'll probably have you not only try Loomly and talk about it.
Yes, Loomly today.
At some point, if I get the time next week, I would like to do a comparison.
Okay.
Probably as a separate, not a live video. I'll just do like a Loomly versus Hootsuite versus that. I'll just like get the free trial of all of them and kind of just compare the interfaces.
Yeah.
But I really liked Loomly just because it had a lot of the features that we needed and a really good price point for someone just getting into the dipping their toes into it. Hootsuite, for example, is like $100 per month per license versus like Loomly is like $30 30-ish. So, and there's a Icono Square that I found, and they kind of have some different features. And they were, I don't know, 43 euros or something. I don't know, 50, and who knows, around $50 a month. So,
yeah.
So there's a few of them out there. Worth investing if, you know, that gives you an extra hour of productivity or whatever, like cuts that out every day, that time compounded, plus like lower mental load from responding in different places. Like, I think there's a huge benefit there to investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Even though you could do this manually. We're trying, again, there's like a different mindset between like bootstrapping as leanly as you can and then investing in yourself to increase your productivity and your results as fast as you can. And part of what we're trying to do is get you a consistent client acquisition model by the end of June. So, you know, a little over 5 months. And so definitely worth it to invest. The one question I had for you about like the work that you were doing and you know, trying to cover time box multiple things. How are you progressing towards consistent outreach of 35 people a day?
I think I hit that. I did hit it 3 out of the 4 days this week. So I'm doing well with that. I've found that now, like, I really do think Loonly is going to be helpful, but that now that I've done it a few times, I can go more quickly between them because it's starting to become a routine, starting to become a habit. And so what used to take me a lot of time and effort of figuring out even how I was going to do it now has kind of streamlined a little bit. And so I can focus on the doing rather than on the figuring out how to do. So that's been really nice. And so what used to take me, you know, the full day to get the 35, I can now do in a couple of hours. So that's been really nice. And the other thing too that I've found is that if I can split that up into a couple of different chunks throughout the day, it's super manageable. And it doesn't feel like this big, like, okay, I have to do all my outreach now.
Break it up, kind of do a few sprints.
Yeah.
Nice. Very good. Good insight. And so, we'll get to that and then maybe even adjust the goal.
Yay.
But I guess maybe we'll add in Loonly first and then see if that gives you more time and then, you know, start poking that goal upwards a little bit at a time.
Poke the bear.
Don't double it. You know, add 5 or something, right?
That's smart.
Okay, great. Well, let us close with a business tip, and I am doing a series on focusing. Yesterday I talked about schedule and focus, and I even noticed yesterday that my focus was so much more on point with the mornings because my schedule has been more routine, because like afternoons and other things have been going back and forth, or there's craziness or grocery shopping or whatever. I haven't had as consistent an afternoon routine. It is so much harder for me to focus. And so I definitely have seen that impact. So go to yesterday's, I guess that's 119 if you want to hear that business tip. But I'm going to lean in more today on how to design your work area for focus. So I mean, one tip is just cleaning. My area is semi-clean. There's definitely a few things I could clean up.
A few, but it's not bad.
But everything is relative. You know, the less clutter there is in your workspace, you know, like it does have an impact on your brain. It does translate into kind of brain clutter. So your brain sees everything around you. It is actively filtering out everything that's not relevant, but to a certain extent, the more things it has to actively filter out, the more work you're making it do, even if you're not aware of that, because by definition, that's work it's keeping you from being aware of. So I think that's a lot of, you know, a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm used to my mess, or, you know, I tune it out. And
it's comfortable for me.
Right. Your brain has to work to do that. And so
it's just used to working to do that.
Plus, you know, the other thing with clutter is it can provide you with visual cues, like a wash of different visual cues for different activities. Whereas if you have a workspace that's relatively clean, you can make sure the stuff there is stuff that specifically triggers you to work. And so one of the things I would like to do is clean off my desk a lot more, and then have like a physical work transformation. Since I do work from the same desk that I hang out and I don't work from bed. But that's one thing I don't have to worry about. Like I don't chill and read in my office chair or whatever. But like all of my computer stuff is a family and work and fun and whatever is all on the same computer. Yeah. So I want to do a physical transformation. Visual cues are important. So there was one study that was really interesting by someone who was working with companies on their snacks. And they changed the label of sugary snacks to red and healthy snacks to green, and they found the consumption of the sugary snacks went down just because that visual cue, like red, warning, that people responded to that and had the sugary snacks less because it prompted them to like stop or think where before their default was just grabbing the candy bar or whatever it was.
Humans are so suggestible. I love it.
Right, so much more than we think. Right. And so I think the benefit, so with a lot of visualization and it's not a mood board when you do it, like a vision board or something like that. Like vision boards, like pictures of what your goals and what you want to have happen, those visual reminders to set intention. I think people view those as like, this is to increase my motivation, and I don't think that is probably their primary most powerful use. I think their use is intentionally, like best done intentionally, as if it's like a physical visual reminder, putting it in your workspace in a place that's dedicated for the work, or in a way that's dedicated for work, to set that default of like, this is why I'm here, that default intention. Or if it's like a visualization activity as like a boundary to, I'm going to work now, and one of the ways that I signal that work transition is, I spend some time visualizing success or visualizing what I want to accomplish today, or my long-term goal, or whatever that practice is, right? And the benefit there, again, is not the motivation from the visualization, it's the ritual to switch your brain into a default work mode. So,
that is huge, that idea of transitions, because I think one of the reasons why those of us who struggle, with productivity and, getting things done, it's a lot because of transitions and things like that. Right. So, if you can do something like that cues your brain on multiple levels, like, okay, this is work time. Like, me going to the library, I'm in that room, I do work in that room.
Right.
It's the only thing I do in that room.
For many people, that movement to a workspace is the transition, right? So you don't have to think about that. If you're working from home, from a work office, you might add something. Yeah. Like the random image that actually came to me is actually Japanese Shinto temples where you wash your hands with water, right?
Yes.
Like there's an activity, a ritual you go through before you go into the temple, and it's a message of cleanliness, purification. It's got an aesthetic element, the feel of the cold, clean water on your hands. But there's like a ritual you do to get you in that mindset. Now, like in, Christian churches, you will start your meeting with a prayer, which is, as much to transition you into the, worship mode, versus that. And so it's the same thing with like work and, different states. Yeah. And so having that, regular transition. So, clean your workspace, get rid of distractions. If you do have things that are distracting, you can label them in red or hide them or otherwise minimize them to discourage you from engaging in counterproductive behaviors. Make that harder, right? Make the things that inspire you to work more available, more visible, so that you can get into the work mode. And then also, think about maybe having a ritual when entering the space. And that's something I'm going to work on after these videos, because I do share the videos, but I'm going to do like a 5-minute meditation before transitioning from video to a different style of work, because that's one of the transitions that I could definitely work on.
Yeah, I like that.
So
good luck.
All right, so that's actually lots of focus tips, but there's more still to come. So All right. As it is Friday, we'll see you on Monday. Until then, make big changes, one small habit at a time.
Bye.